And welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, a bad magistrate who takes gold from criminal organizations to reduce the sentences and fines of criminals.
Jeez, Tim Longo.
Why are you being a bad magistrate, man?
That's a mouthful.
It was indeed. And I figure you haven't even seen that.
No.
What weird things about this game that well, it's just the beginning of a quest line as far as I can tell, where so we're talking about Morrowind, and we're already at a point where Tim has gone places I've not gone. I clearly have seen some things that he hasn't seen. There's that Fort Moonmoth or whatever that's just east of Balmora. Yeah. If you go in there and talk to the boss of that place, the head the captain or whatever, he's looking to bring down this corrupt magistrate. And he, as part of doing that, he wants to kill off the Tong or whatever they're called. Tang, I can't remember.
Morag Tong, not the Morag Tong. The assassins?
No, it's more like an older thieves guild, the Cameron. I don't know what they're. This lore stuff.
Yeah. So it's not the Morag Tong then.
I don't think so. No, it starts with a C.
Okay.
I'm gonna look it up because I can't. I just literally cannot remember something like that. But he's basically
this magistrate's part of that group.
He's taking money from them, so he's like, well, I'll just have you go kill I'll have you go kill those guys, and then those guys will be gone, and then I'll be able to bring him in because he won't be protected by this group. I can't find it. So I don't.
No, yeah,
I don't know.
I'll take your word for it.
I can't remember this guy's name.
You can update us next time when you've killed them.
His name is Well, I don't know if I'm going to get that far, but yeah, he's this guy. But yeah, here we go. Blah blah blah. He wants you to do a bloodbath. So you're basically supposed to kill these people, kill the bad people in Balmora. Oh, maybe I could do it because maybe they're all in Balmora. That was a little bit unclear to me previously. Anyway, Tong is what they're called. The Tong. That's a mouthful. So yeah, I mean that's one of the things I've gone and done. I don't know why I went to speak to him. I think somebody just said, he might have.
I have a quest to go there too. Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least to talk to somebody there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it's him. Yeah. So
it's interesting that the name of that guild is something Tong, like the Morag Tong, which is so it's they have a language going, and I feel like all the names of the NPCs are all within a certain sort of, is it etymology? Etymology. Yeah, the bugs. Yeah. I always mess those up. But yeah, there's a certain etymology to them.
I dated an entomologist.
Okay, well that clears that up for you.
For life, yeah.
You'll never mess that up. But you know what I mean? All the races seem to have, again, we're there's flirting with the edge of problematic in some places for sure, but
for sure. Yeah.
But like all the dark elves names seem to be sort of within a certain, they do a good job. Yeah. So and I don't know if they have, and they must have developed rules like that over the years. So there's a sense of sensibility to that for their universe, because I assume that would go, and that would be occurring in Oblivion and Skyrim and MMO.
Yeah, it's definitely true that orcs have names in general. I'm playing an orc, and my name is not particularly orcish. But in general, the orcs, have names that sound guttural but multi-syllabic, but like particulate, I guess, like Japanese or something like that, where it's like a lot of short words, guttural words.
Yeah.
And then the Nords have a certain type of name, and then et cetera. So it definitely is a thing. And then of course even the place names are the same way. So the dwarven locations are going to have different sounding names than the Dunmer locations or what have you, or the places where the Imperials have come in. So Fort Moonmoth is an Imperial location. You can tell because it's English. Whereas the Dunmer places are going to be unusual names. And it's definitely a thing.
Well, I mean, it gives it, just like some of the, which I think we'll talk about later, some of the sort of like groups that are emerging and some of the maybe politics that are emerging, even though it's only I'm only 8 hours in or something, you can start to see some of the factions and the tensions there. It just gives it such a good sense of place and realism, which again, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. I have a vague memory in some of the playthroughs that I watched before starting this of Daggerfall. There was some of that going on, but it's just like a leap, like a huge leap forward to Morrowind from Daggerfall, like an enormously different game in so many levels. And this I can just again see why this was sort of the jumping off point for the, this is the formula is starting to begin, and people are just at the time, and I was infatuated with it at the time too. And that's why I tried to play it like 3 times. I started this game. Because I just wanted to believe, and couldn't stick with it. But it's very impressive. Like, it's kind of mind blowing what it's trying to do at this time for this, at least for my impression so far. I don't know if that breaks down over time, but so far it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, because of course I haven't played it before either. I mean, I think Oblivion does what it does right up till the end, right? I don't think it ever really breaks down to the end. He says, as if these games end. But up until you finish the sort of main quest line, if that's what you're following, and I guess in this case, the main quest line, I guess, would be the stuff you're doing for Caius, I guess is his name, right? The being here,
the Blades guy.
The Blades. Yeah. I was like the Harpers, but it's not the Harpers. Their actual name. But it's got clear analogies to those other things. Like it's very clearly like, hey, this was somebody's homebrew campaign. They took ideas from other campaigns they had played in. They wanted secret societies, but then they wanted some structure, and they built this guild system. And like you just can kind of see how that all happened, and those things just keep going in all the games moving forward, which is really wild.
Well, and the other.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's another quick example that I don't know has happened to you, and I actually remember once it happened to me. Once I remembered that it was a thing. The Dark Brotherhood.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. Which is like a huge thing in this franchise, and this. I think this was the first game where they became so prominent, and it is, and it's an analogous to a lot of other examples of that, but like. You hear somebody say Dark Brotherhood in gaming, and it's like, oh, because there's usually like a Dark Brotherhood quest line if you want to go evil, and they're like a whole thing. And then, of course, in this game, I think they're trying to kill you.
I mean, it seems like they've got a contract out on you, which is sort of your introduction to them. Whereas your introduction to them in the other games, if you're not generally, if you're not trying to trigger it, is you accidentally kill somebody. Like you kill somebody that the game treats you as, you shouldn't have killed that person. And for however that, because they didn't attack you first, I guess, or whatever. And that's treated as a murder. And then they reach out to you with this handprint on a piece of paper that says, "We know." It's this like this bloody handprint. And it just says, "We know" under it. And that's your clue that, and you might have a dream, I think, at that point. I don't normally play that sort of content, so I don't remember.
So they make so the event of murdering somebody, like an unmotivated murder, triggers
a quest line. Yeah.
So they're making an assumption that you made that choice to do that, and that you're interesting. That's pretty sweet. Yeah. That's a pretty sweet way to do it.
Yeah, and they're usually pretty well written. I know that Emil Pegarulo wrote them.
That's what I mean. There's like everyone always says like, did you play the Dark Brotherhood quest? And it's like, no, I didn't. I'm not a monster. But then it's like you want to play because it's good content.
Yeah. Do you want to play the best stories in the game?
Yeah.
So they dangle that. Yeah, for sure. That's a whole thing. That's a whole thing for sure. what I was going to ask about there, what I was branching off a moment ago, is what do you think about the quests being tied to these guilds? I don't know if that was true of prior games in the series. It's certainly true going forward. They're normally big quest lines with lots of things in them. In Skyrim, certainly there's tons of Mage Guild and Fighters Guild. Is it called the Fighters Guild? But whatever. It is the Fighters Guild, effectively. Companions or something like that. That's the whole werewolf thing. I was just curious what your thoughts were about that.
You mean the associate? You mean kind of locking them behind like faction?
Right.
Them being
structurally speaking, you go to this town. It's like, oh well, if you're looking for work, I mean, specifically, Caius, points you there and says, hey, you got to go get some rep with the Fighters Guild or the Mage Guild. Like he's like, you can do either. I don't, I'm good. And then it's up to you to go do that. And then once you've done enough of that, you go back. I was curious what your thoughts were, as a designer about that. And as a DM or whatever, like all those sort of things that we've done with role playing in our lives.
Well, I think that I don't know. I'm just off the cuffing this, but I mean, guilds or factions or reputation is sort of like an NPC group, and NPCs tend to be what drives a lot of the story in all the cases we're talking about anyway. So, I mean, I can see the logic to it. I think what I'm kind of mulling over in my head is sort of some comparison points. And I think of like Witcher 3 or what have you, where I think the trick, and so I haven't actually seen this in Morrowind yet, because I'll tell my story about how I've been playing so far, because I haven't actually been doing faction quests so far, or those big ones at least. And I don't know what it's going to mean for me down the road. And I'm actually worrying that I might need to go back and do faction quests because I didn't do them. But I worry about the flexibility and fluidity for a player to make decisions on playing the way they want to play. Do you know what I mean? Like, because like for instance, the Mage Guild, when Cassius told us to talk to both guilds, right? I think, he offered. He said you should.
I think he said you should. I think he basically wanted you to get some ranks in either one of them. But I think it's basically like, hey, this is where some quests are.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I don't have a desire at all to work for the mages. Like, I had none, and so I'm like, I should do it. But I guess what I'm summarizing here is that I think that what's in like an MMO, which I've done a lot of rep grinding, right, for, it's generally opt-in based. It's like you choose to like spend your time doing this. But I'm worried about in this game that the factions, especially the Fighters and Mages Guild, are actually how you get through to the main quest. And if that's the case, I'm a little worried about though an endless open world that I can do whatever I want, you kind of can't do whatever you want if you want to play the story, because you have to do these things that are basically behind faction walls, and you can't progress, and you can't get the good story stuff until you've gotten a certain reputation with them, I assume. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe you can.
No, I think it's really just kicking off, just being able to establish you're capable, I think, is really all that's happening. And then I don't think you need to go back to it at all.
It's a balance, kind of a skill test or something.
Yeah. In terms of in fiction, I think it's really just, do you pass muster, basically, is all he's trying to do. Like, can you really be a blade? And you go do a couple errands, and then you come back, and it's like, yep, I can totally be a blade. And he's like, okay, you're a blade now. And he sends you off, and you can follow the main quest. But of course, you don't have to follow the main quest, right? I mean, you can do whatever the heck you want, right? So
I wonder if that's what I should do. I wonder if I should.
If you don't want to do more stuff, like, just don't do more stuff. Do just the main quest. I mean, these games are normally fairly short if you only do the main quest. I mean, I don't know how true that is of Morrowind. Our sort of our well-informed but not obsessive in-house play, speed runs of the game. Because at the end of each project, here's an inside look at Bethesda. there's a speedrun contest between somebody nominated by the development team and somebody nominated by the QA team. And whoever wins gets bragging rights, I guess. I don't think it's really for anything. Spoilers, QA always wins. But they're generally like 2 hours. Like it's, to speedrun the main quest is like 2 hours. Naively, this is like not somebody who's trying to shave. I'm sure that's nowhere near the world record, et cetera, et cetera. But it's like, somebody who's done it a few times and knows some shortcuts and has figured out some stuff because they work on the game and they like figure out things. But even then, both of them learn things from the other. Like, oh, I didn't know you could do that, to shortcut this part of the quest or, whatever. It's very entertaining. There's always funny things that everybody knows is like, if you don't want to talk to somebody, punch them before they start their dialogue so you don't get locked in, because you lose precious seconds every time somebody talks to you. It grabs the camera, it focuses on them, all that stuff that they do for framing. It's very, very funny. So like you walk up to the tunnel snake in Fallout 3 and you just like punch him as soon as you can. So you prevent, because the combat's way faster than the conversation. It's extremely funny.
Oh, funny. How funny.
Yeah. So it's lots of stuff like that people just know. And with Skyrim, it's like you can go to the end of this dungeon if you get a certain dragon shout. There's a dragon shout that lets you teleport short distances or move really fast short distance, but it's just enough to get you over some gap. I mean, it's like stuff like that. Not the really crazy stuff that speedrunners come up with, where it's like they find bugs that they exploit.
Yeah,
like,
right. They launch themselves.
You reload the game, and you're riding a horse, but you're sideways. You can, it's just
yeah.
So yeah, they're not long main quests necessarily, but I don't know to what degree they were completable without gaining extra levels in earlier games, right? I don't know if in Morrowind you can be like, yeah, I can spend 10 hours and finish the main quest. I have no concept of that.
Well, it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sort of remains to be seen how, if I'm going to hit some walls myself. I'm kind of already hitting some walls in difficulty because I think I don't know if I'm at the right level for what I'm trying to do, but because I didn't do, like, I think I did one Fighters Guild quest. I did that egg quest in the caves, and that's all I've done for them. And I didn't do any mage ones, I don't think. So I'm just like, I mean, factions are good because again, they have sort of like a fictional identity to like give you a purpose to basically level up. So there's some direction, but you have a lot of choice in there versus like a BioWare, more structure that is more like,
right.
This is the story quest. These are the side quests, and you can kind of do all of them or nothing, part of them or whatever. Right. But here it's much more like find the tracks you want and then use those tracks to level up, I guess. But I just don't know if that's, if that's going to be true or not. Like, I don't know. It's a little intimidating and overwhelming the way I'm playing. I'm not sure. Like, I hope I don't lose focus because I'm not, using those.
Right.
Right. Because I'm really just like bouncing around right now. I am trying to find the Morag Tong, which I'll talk about.
Let's go into that because I don't even know what you're talking about. So, you were like, is it the Morag Tong? I'm like, I don't know that word. I've seen the word Morag, though, because I feel like it's a location as well, maybe.
Maybe those two words together mean something.
I feel like Morag is like one of the...
There is another word that's similar that I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't think it's the exact same spelling.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's like a location, I think.
Yeah.
That I got very lost at one point and saw an awful lot of street signs because it was dark. I was trying to find my way back to Belmora. And
are you just wandering the countryside, or what do you like? What's your general?
Well, no, I had gone to do a specific thing, but while I was out there, it got dark, and I think I missed a turn coming back. I just didn't notice, on the ground, like it's got that sort of like. it's a little lighter where the road is. Yeah, it's not like cobblestoned versus not. It's like it's a little lighter, which was a kind of a common rendering thing. Like you would basically have a alpha layer above that you were like, okay, we're going to blend out a little bit here. It's basic, but they don't have enough memory to do a full different texture underneath, so it's really just like it's lighter. I mean, I think is basically what's going on. If I had to guess, is like they're sort of doing that. I mean, this is stuff that they did on what's the Factor 5 games?
Rogue
Squadron, and so they had done something. In fact, we actually used a similar technique on some of the ships in Starfighter, but to show scratches, like it's like, oh, you have this alpha layer and whatever. So to use as a blend. So so they're doing that, but they don't have tons and tons of texture. So it's like you don't get a whole different surface for the road. You just get kind of a slightly different looking road. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll try to follow that. But when it gets dark, that can be hard because my gamma correction also doesn't work. So I can't like even make the screen brighter.
Oh, crap. Really? Yeah, that's a biggie for this game.
It's super tricky.
Is that a driver problem or something?
I don't really know because it was working at one point and then it stopped and I'm like, okay, don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good. That's an interesting topic that you were just saying as far as like the limitations of memory and rendering techniques, because you look at this game and you're like, if you put it in its era, it's pretty impressive and pretty neat. And I was talking about this with Reed, a friend of the podcast and friend of ours who loves this game. And
former interviewee.
He's been on the podcast. I might want to consider having him come on for this game because he says he played the hell out of this game. Like of all the Elder Scrolls games, and we were talking about how different it is from the others. I haven't played Skyrim, as I've mentioned, but I started all of the others. And this one has a different look to it.
Yeah.
And part of that's architecture, part of that's art direction. But you mentioned the technical side of it, and it's like it's sort of forced the game to not be homogenous, but it's sort of a look,
Yeah.
And yeah, it didn't even occur to me to think about some of the constraints of why that would be, because there's a lot of modularity to the architecture. There's a lot of reuse, and to some degree, when you have to do that, like the game is going to have a feel because you're only using so many assets and you have so much memory. So, and this was on Xbox, the original Xbox, so it's like
so 64 meg machine.
So
it's wild. I mean, it really is a product of that to a great degree. I mean. And I have to remember to check on those emails. But, thinking about the choices you had to make and like trying to come up with budgets for like, hey, you're going to be streaming this whole world around you all the time. And how much of that they were actually streaming. Like, I don't think that system has changed dramatically in terms of how you do it, since the time. Like, I think we've gotten more and more capacity, but it's not like
the concepts are the same.
The concepts are largely the same. So it is super interesting. I have spent most of my time thus far in Mage Guild and Fighters Guild quests and in the sort of southwest corner or southwest area between Pelagia, I think it's called, and wherever you start is that Saint Need, and then Balmora.
I walked through that whole section.
So I've been kind of going around, and now actually I'm starting to see how things connect. I just found a new location which looks like and maybe I think the city is like this, but it looks like a barrow that's got like wooden sides. It sort of looks like a tall ship that's been turned over, so it like stacks up. No,
the city looks like kind of a Mos Eisley.
Okay. So it's more like Balmora then.
It's more like Balmora, but like on a grander scale. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, now I'm curious to know what the heck you're doing, because I'm all been in the same area, and like every time I get to something where it's like, oh, you're going to have to go off to such and such. And it's like, I'm like, is that far away? Maybe I'll just stick and do the nearby stuff so I can do more of it. Has been my approach.
Go deep. Yeah. And that's what Reed said he tends to do, which I actually tend to do as well. Most of the time when I play these games, I wring every bit of content out of an area before I leave.
Focus, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. Yeah.
So you kind of like systematically complete everything you can. So of course I did the opposite of that. So, I mean, obviously, again, for the podcast, I always try to play differently than I normally would, because I want to just like, contrast both of us, but also just stress test myself and my assumptions on especially RPGs, because I definitely have a way that I play. But then the other thing is, once I get a character concept, generally I go pretty deep and commit to that concept as much as I can. So in Balmora, there is one of the Morag Tong outposts, or what do I want to say, chapters or something. And the Morag Tong are the enemy to the Dark Brotherhood. They're both assassins guilds, but the Morag Tong apparently are good assassins.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Only the best.
Only the good guys. Yeah. And so they are hired to assassinate, but it's more of a Robin Hood situation or something. So I met them, but then when you talk to them in Balmora, they're like, well, we don't really admit people into the organization. Here, you have to go to Vivec City, if that's how you say it, and the head person is there. And so, yeah, we can't do it here. So I'm like, okay, so I did a few things in Balmora, but like I said, I had maybe 1 or 2 quests. And then I was like, okay, I'm out of here. So I literally did what I said I wasn't going to do. I took the Strider, which I was like, Vivec City. Oh yeah, that's too far. I'm not going to walk that. So I just took the thing, and then I went, and I was like, oh no. And I actually remember from previous playthroughs when I had attempted to play the game, I had gotten here, and I think this is actually where I probably stopped playing, because you get to Vivec City and it's like, what do they call them? Cantors? Cantor, is canton? Canton. Is that a word?
Canton is a word. Cantor is also a word. Cantors are the Jewish singers, rabbinical singers.
Is a canton like a building or like a community? Maybe a word for like a.
I think it might be like a community, like Cantonese.
Maybe, yeah. No, it's like I forget the name that they use, but they're these buildings. I'm not huge.
Sure what that comes from.
So the city is made of these things, and they're these buildings that are kind of their own little encapsulated, it's essentially their version of like a skyscraper, but it's like in their art style. There's multiple levels, and each of them have their own sewers and waste works and all this kind of stuff's happening, but they all look identical, and it's on this grid, and there's probably like 6 or 8 of them. And then you go behind the back of the city, and there's like the main temple where the watch is, and then there's like the palace in the back, which you can't get into, and it's like locked up and there's nobody there. So I'm sure that's going to come into play later. But it's like enormous for this game, and you move so slowly. So it's like, I would say to like, if you were to like scour one of these buildings, like, so the first one is like the foreign quarter, which of course all the outsiders are in, and it's like they have the whole like city dynamic. And then there's like one that is the arena, and then there's one that is the Redonians, and then there's one that's, so the Halal, or I forget how you say that one. Anyway, there's just the different groups. But to sort of scour one of these is probably like an hour by itself. If you go every level, and talk to everybody.
Oh, right. So it's like that leveled. Oh man, yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot. So I did quite a bit, and I did, like, there was a serial killer quest that I solved. I found the serial killer. You have to go and like talk to people and get clues from like, oh, it's like, this is the description. Oh, and we saw the person here maybe, and it's really cool because the city watch like wants you to go. They say, well, we can't officially ask you to help, but if you happen to find the killer, let us know, And so I was like
them.
Yeah. And then, and I did a bunch of, fetch quests, and there's like a bunch of like merchants fighting. And so it was like I was playing a different game. I was like playing the city game. Like this is like, Elder Scrolls, the city game. And I'm sure all of them have a city in them.
So it's
or
like
something.
Dragon Age 2.
Yeah, right. It's like it's if they had as if they had spun out a game and called it Morrowind Vivec City. Anyway, so I've been playing this whole different. So the reason I went here is to go talk to the Morag Tong because I want to join up. And so you get there and you're like talking to people like, oh, I want to join the Morag Tong. Does anybody know? And of course they're an Assassin's Guild, so they're super secretive. And they're like, yeah, we think they've seen them before. They might actually be below the arena. And I'm like, what? Okay, so I go down there to the sewers or whatever. I'm like, and looking around and killing rats and getting attacked and all kinds of stuff. And I find this storage room in the sewers, or actually it's in the wasteworks, so the level above the sewers technically. And there's this storage room, and I'm picking locks and I'm breaking and entering and I'm like doing all, down here and like opening. And I find in the corner of this one storing room behind some boxes, a trap door. Ooh. And I'm like, that's gotta be it. And I'm not skilled enough to get in. And so I've narrowed it down. I think that must be where they are. And I want to get in there so badly, but I mean,
and this is one of the things that like a Baldur's Gate does very differently, right? Is that in Baldur's Gate, you have a party member who can open that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the trade-off between a party-based and a character-based or single character-based game like this, avatar-based, whatever you want to call it, Ultima style RPG, right? It's like, well, even a lot of Ultimas have parties, but I was thinking of like, I guess most of them actually have parties, so that it's not the right analogy, but I think some of the early ones don't, and that might be where I first went. Well, but anyway, I mean, it's like it's just wild to be like, oh yeah, in any other sort of game, I would have somebody who would deal with this. Like there are no obstacles really, in a sense, in a Baldur's Gate game, because like any balanced D&D game, you've got a party member who does that, and this is you're a lone wolf out there.
Well, my worry, which I was alluding to earlier, when it comes to like, this is so, again, this is Elder Scrolls game. This is a Bethesda game. This is an open, choice-based game. My worry is that they didn't really send me here. Like the person I talked to in Balmora said that's where they are, but they didn't give me a quest to go here. I chose to come here, and I'm wondering if this is a skill test.
You had to do something else.
Well, no, not even that there's a quest, but that because when I try to pick that lock, because I can pick other locks, and I'm working on my security skill, and it is, I think, one of my primary stats, so it's appropriate for me to do so. But when I try to pick that lock, it says you are not skilled enough to open the door. And so I'm worried that
you're not opening that door for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so now it's like, well, I really want to do a thing, but I'm not supposed to be here yet.
Or you could buy a scroll of opening or whatever, unhinging or whatever it's called. There are scrolls that that give you a temporary touch skill, to open a thing. Like you basically use knock. It, and then the next thing you touch, it's basically like knock. And then of course I think they're at different levels, but there were. I'm so greedy. My algorithm for using resources in games like this is like, I'll just use it on the next thing. This from playing D&D with me. As a player, I'm just like, oh, you gave me an inspiration, next bad roll. Like, I don't care. Is this important? Who cares? The baker wants to charge you full price for a cookie. Damn it, I use my inspiration. Yeah. I'm just like, I just burn through that. It's part of the character in that case. But, so I'm the sort of person who, like, I found a scroll of unhinging or whatever in Angtherband or whatever it was called, the dwarven place, and I and the chest next to it was locked, and I'm like, cool, I'll unlock that, and blam, I got into that, got whatever's in there. Wow. And then I go around the corner and there's like a door that's locked, and I'm like, dang it. Did I really care about the 6 cabbages I got or whatever? Right.
Cabbages. That's how they got
you. It was like, who cares? It was almost a joke. It was almost like, I see you, Brett style player.
I'm sure
I'm gonna mess with you. So I appreciate that generally. But yeah, so there is that opportunity to basically like temporarily raise your open skill to be, 30
they give you
higher.
options. They're there.
You
got to find
spend
them.
money on them.
Yeah, and it's I mean, and it's such a rich systemic game that I appreciate that from an RPG standpoint. So I'm not going to give up. Like I'm going to try to, and I'm working on my security, so maybe I can get it up. But I did love the fact that I heard about them. I am assassin, right? That's my class, and my whole thing is based around being an assassin. And I wanted to do that, but I didn't want to play, a bad character, and I don't want to be a part of the Dark Brotherhood. I was going to try. I
want to kill people, but I want to be good.
Well, we're in this game. I knew we were going to be killing people, so I don't know. Well, sure. The funny thing is, like, now that I'm looking for them. The cool thing about it, which is definitely built up in my head more than really probably is in the game, but now that I'm looking for them, obviously I have the option in speech, in questions, right, to a lot of the NPCs I talk to. And so as you ask people about them, it's like it's sort of building up this mythology around them for myself, because I haven't met anybody other than in Balmora, and so it's like, who are these, and they talk, everyone, like a lot of people talk about them being the sort of the enemy of the Dark Brotherhood, and that they have this code that they go by, and they're kind of respected, so it's not like Jedi, but it's sort of like Jedi, it's like, it's this sort of like sense
or
of
ninjutsu or something.
Totally ninjutsu. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So there's honor to them.
There's a lot of that flavor actually to the Dunmer stuff, because I think that when you talk about Tong, which is that's basically the Dunmer Thieves Guild, which is opposed by the New Thieves Guild, which is not as corrupt, right? Like they're just going to steal stuff, whereas the Tong is like doing stuff behind the scenes that is deeper, more got its fingers directly into all of society. So there's like, and it sounds like the Dark Brotherhood versus Morag Tong thing is more like, no, the Morag Tong are actually, because of their values, are the good version of the thing that they are, and so, whereas the Dark Brotherhood, the money grubbing will kill anybody if you've got the coin, is the more evil. So it's sort of interesting in that way. Yeah, for sure.
But I just love that I gave myself this quest, and I got closer and closer to the answer, as I was talking to people, and that the game supported that. And then when I got below the arena, I mean, I could get into this trapdoor and it not be them, but they're clearly supposed to be under the arena, and I just haven't found them yet. So if they are down there,
I mean, if that happens, then you'll have done your quest, but I guess your quest wasn't good enough.
Jeez. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, just take a slow, deep breath there and move on.
Don't call attention to it, people. Just move on. So it's going to feel neat when I find them and when I eventually join them, because it'll feel like I earned it, and that
for sure.
But then along the way, I found a bunch of other, like there's this guy that this wizard turned invisible, and he's like permanently invisible, and he wants.
I had
help.
A similar sort of funny thing happen.
Yeah. So it's it's fun to like, because I feel like the BioWare games do a pretty good job at the city version, the city portion of a campaign, where it's like cities are their own. It's their own thing.
There's lots of intrigue.
Yeah, it's a whole different. You can have a whole campaign just in a city, right? So
I had a similar magician thing that was pretty funny. It took me a minute to understand what had happened. So I was out looking for this outlaw who was like robbing people. I was just going to go kill him and come back, because I was trying to get in good with this whatever his name, Vero, the guy at Fort Moonmoth. I was just looking at my quest list, like, well, I'll go do this thing for him. Maybe that'll advance. And so, which is one of the things I think is maybe a downside. It's like, I don't really know, like the Mages Guild, it feels like I actually need to level up all of my magic a lot. And I'm not going to get to that. So that might just be the end of that, But anyway, so I'm out there and I'm walking again. It's night. I don't think that matters, but it worked for the story that happened. And I'm walking along, and then I get to a point, and the road is clear in front of me. I'm like, okay, all right, I'll keep going. And then I turn around, and I hear a scream, and I'm like, what? I turn back around because I'm thinking maybe this, like, I was like, wow, this is really cool for the time because this outlaw I'm looking for is on this road somewhere to this town I'm trying to get to. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe he's robbing somebody right now, and I'm going to run over and deal with that. No, instead, there's just now a body in the road.
Wow.
And it's just face down in the road. There's a body. And honestly, it doesn't look terribly body-like. It's not great. The human bodies are not great. But I'm like, okay, let me go figure this out. And I search the body, and it's like expensive robes, expensive shoes, like all this expensive junk. But then next to the body is also a book, which turns out to be the journal of this wizard who came up with a flying spell. And he's like, they laughed at me before, but they're not going to be laughing anymore. When I cast this and such and such, it was extremely funny. Wow. It was such a nothing moment, in terms of like cost. You're just using elements that you have in the game already, but just making a funny moment out of it.
That's pretty good.
Which is. Yeah, it was pretty funny. You just basically hear the Wilhelm scream, and you turn around, there's a body on the ground. You're like, whoa, what happened here?
Is flying in the game as a spell? Or is that like...
Flying is in the game, I believe. In fact, one of the things on his body is...
Because that's a great intro.
Something of Icarus, like something of Icarus, Wings of Icarus or whatever. I've got some scroll in my inventory now, which I actually think that might be part of the speedrun for... Oblivion, though, like the really fast Oblivion speedrun, I think you can fly back basically up over the walls of the final area if you go buy the right stuff and spell up in this way and buy these potions, whatever. Like you can basically fly in such a way, because the way Bethesda games are built is like, well, if this thing's gonna happen here, then it's here. Like, yeah. You can just go there. If you can find a way to get there, it's there waiting. It's not like a scripted thing. That's not locked. You have to. Yeah. It's not locked. I mean, it might be locked from the outside, but it's in there.
Yeah, it's not.
You load into there, it's there. Like if you find a way to get into the location, the thing is there. And I think one of the speedruns I've seen, at least for Oblivion, involves doing exactly that. It's like a 6-minute game if you know how to do this, and you just like, okay, I go to this person and buy the potion of this, and then I fly to here and I get, such and such, scroll of flying, I guess. And
I mean, Breath of the Wild, right, took that same formula.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to go straight to the end, you can just run right there, right? and just tackle it that way. So
interesting. Well, but I mean, it's a great introduction to the concept that there is flying, it's like they had a spell they knew everyone would want to have, and it's like, okay, how can we creatively, rather than just like training you or like having a mage at the Mages Guild tell you about it, it's like, no, let's have somebody fail,
fall out of nowhere,
and it's like, oh, and then you're like, oh wait, can I fly? Do I want to fly? Maybe I'll die. It's like, it's pretty clever.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It was a real fun moment for me because I was like, oh yes, this is the sort of thing we would do, right? It's that because it takes no additional effort.
Yeah, it's writing and scripting and yeah,
exactly. I mean, these days maybe voice lines, but
yeah, right. That's true. That's fair.
But it's just a little bit of text, so it's pretty great. I mean, there's a quest thing in Skyrim where it's basically like the Headless Horseman. So it only happens at night. They just use all these sort of different conditions really well. It's like when you open up things like the clock and the day-night cycle and location, and I mean just all the variables that are in your general RPG campaigns. I mean, you look at a character sheet and it's like a million numbers, and that's just the stuff that's on your character sheet. And then they have all these things that are out that the world is kind of described by as well, weather and etc. And they just take all of those things and, well, what if this one weird thing? And there's a ghost you can follow to their grave and just like dig up some treasure or whatever, but only if you happen to be on this one road between X and Y, at night. that you'll actually find this thing. And they do that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I did play the hell out of Fallout 3, so I understand, I mean, there were a lot of great happy accidents like that in that game. So I can imagine that in this concept. Well, I hope I see some of that in this game. That would be, yeah. I mean, the other thing that the other sort of related to the world building side of it that we talked about in pre-show that I really, at least if I'm filling in the blanks myself in my head, which probably a big portion of it is that, there's just a lot of history that they're talking about, and a lot of like groups and factions and like politics and intrigue, and and it's like, it's light enough. It's lightly touched upon when you talk to people. Like, they don't go into super depth about it, but there's just enough to be like, wow, there's a kind of a lot going on around here, and you start picking up different, like in Vivec City, there's a whole thing about the Daedra, like there's Daedra worshippers there, and like people,
sure, like you do,
yeah, and so people talk about it. And then skooma, like you mentioned skooma last episode about like the drug and stuff. There's this whole thing about that. Obviously, in the city, there'd be much more of it dealing happening, and then this one woman you talk to, her husband gets on skooma, and then you go find him in the sewers, and he's turned into a zombie because of the skooma. And so I don't know. There's just they just add layers and layers of both small and large sort of backstory pieces, and you're just like, man, it's just, there's so much here. So you really do feel, whether it's true, real or not, you feel like it's a well fleshed out, world. So.
Yeah, I mean, every bit of stuff that's in the game has a way of contributing to. They basically use it all, like, so the way I was talking about that mechanically, they do the same thing with all the content. So you don't just get one side of skooma, for example. You don't just get a side where it's like, oh, good merchants won't trade in it, bad merchants will. You also get like, well, what happens to people who use a lot of skooma?
Yeah.
Is there some people who just like started on skooma or like kind of into it, and are basically fine right now? It's like, they've just started a habit, they're not at the end of it. It looks okay. Like, and how, like, I don't know if that's in there in this game, but like, it's like, meeting a character in a, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s novel where it's like, oh, here's a person who uses cocaine recreationally, and they're perfectly fine, versus the other, book, like, I don't know, Less Than Zero, where it's like, oh, they're not so good, so it's right. Like, and you've got like kind of, you could have both ends of that in this as well. Yeah. And so they do Spectrum. That both with the mechanics, but also with the sort of fictional elements, that are part of it. So, that's really, with the spells, it's like, well, sure, we'll take this spell, and we're introducing a spell that's powerful, but also like, hey, be careful. Yeah. And or the other things I'm talking about, like nighttime and and what have you. I mean, there's a lot to play with, and I think that's one of the things that has really historically been strong about Bethesda's quest, and level design teams or just design teams generally speaking, is that they find ways to expose all of that and hook into it and just do wild stuff. I mean, just all over the place stuff. So, yeah. I mean, you want to, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of mechanics and systems and stuff, I mean, there's the leveling up stuff we talked about too.
Right.
In pre-show, it's like,
I was going there as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, anyway, I mean, why don't you explain what you understand of how it works?
Right. Okay. So what I understand of what it works is that because we've chosen classes, and you can build your own, like you could pick your own 5 major skills. But the things that contribute to actually leveling up are those skills. So as a battle mage, I have axe, heavy armor, destruction magic, I think conjuration, and something else. I don't remember what the 5th thing is. Whatever it is, I don't think I do much of it. And those are my 5 major skills. And whenever I level up one of those skills, it contributes to my leveling. And there are basically 10 slots per level. So to go from level 1 to level 2, you have to level 10 levels worth of the 5 major skills that you have. So it could be all axe work. It could be all just like I run and kill things with axes. And in fact, for me, for a while, I had normal armor on and wasn't casting any magic. And that's a separate issue because I chose to be born under the sign of the Atronach. And guess what happens to them? What? They don't regenerate magic when they sleep, or the mana or whatever. So I'd like sleep and I'd get up, have the same amount of mana. So I actually have to find and buy potions, I guess.
Whoa.
Because I chose that, which gave me some other benefits. Like I think it makes my destruction magic more powerful, or something, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Battle mage, that sounds cool. And then pick this sign. I was like, oh yeah, that'll make my magic even more powerful. Yeah. Shame is I won't be able to cast it because I don't have any mana most of the time. It's very funny. When I finally figured out what was going on, I was like, why? I was like looking at some guide and it's like, it says I should regenerate mana when I sleep. And I'm like, that's so weird. And then I'm looking at my character. I'm like, oh, what does the Atronach do? Oh, can't normally regenerate mana.
Oh, no.
Dang it. So it was very, very funny. Yeah, so that's basically, though, the mechanics is like, you can level up your other skills. They just don't contribute to the overall character skill level. So that's one of the ways you can break this game.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, is because I could go and I could run around with light armor and a shield and a sword and use restoration magic, say. Like that would be my actual build. Or use a bow, whatever it is. Like, but just don't use those things that are my major skills. And I'd be constantly leveling those things up. Now they'd start pretty low. Like they'd start like at level 0 or 10 or whatever of ability. But as those things became more powerful, the dynamic creature leveling systems in the game only looks at your actual level and not like your sort of skill levels. It looks at like character level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, to whatever. And that's the way in which the game can definitely be broken. Like, so as you're running around, your athletics is getting better. That's not making, unless you're a character build that uses athletics as one of your major skills, that is not making the world more difficult for you.
Yeah.
So that's the way the game is broken in that way. And I would recommend we don't play into that just so that we kind of get the intended experience.
Right. Yeah.
But that I know that is a way to kind of break the
so
game.
The minor, you have major and minor skills. The minor ones don't do anything for you.
I don't think that. Well, they don't contribute to that level.
To that level up.
So the benefit of the level up, of course, is that you actually are able to take and put a number of points into things that are going to benefit you.
Yeah.
So there is a benefit to actually leveling your major skills. I think, though, in terms of actually like just breaking how the game works on a meta level, the way to do it is to ignore your major skills and train some minor skills, or non skills. I mean, just skills you don't have, because early on they'll level quickly, right? Because you're using a sword and you don't have swordsmanship or whatever, or you're using a bow, you don't have marksmanship, and you just run around and like that's all you ever do. You'll level those fairly quickly, relatively speaking. Like it's harder to go from level 50 to 51 than it is to go from level 0 to 1 or 1 to 2.
Yeah.
10 to 11.
Right. So. Yeah. I'm dabbling in restoration because I just want to be able to heal myself. So, but it's starting at like whatever. I'm like, I don't think I'm even level 10,
14. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's not one of my primaries, but luckily acrobatics is one of my primaries. So jumping will help me. So you don't need to fill a level bar of one of your skills to have it contribute to your overall level. You just need it to go up somewhat in some degree. Yes. Okay.
You could only level your acrobatics, right? And if you just leveled your acrobatics 10 levels, that would be enough to take you from.
But then at that point, if you don't keep all of your stuff up, like if I say I did that and I never leveled up my dagger or my short blades, will having a low short blade make them less effective when I do meet something?
Yeah.
So you kind of So you can get yourself into trouble if you don't
you totally
focus on stuff enough. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I mean, you can get the game broken in the other direction, right?
Right, where you're going to have to like.
Yeah. You can break the game by making it far too easy for yourself, or you can break the game by making it far too hard.
Right. I guess your only out is you could buy, because you can level up through buying skills from trainers, but you'd have to have a lot of money to do that.
It's expensive. Yeah, it's very expensive. So.
Yeah, it's so expensive. Like I'm thinking to myself, like how much money do you get in this game? Because like I couldn't imagine spending 2,000 gold just to get 10 levels of a skill. Like, and I bet you it goes up exponentially as you buy it.
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does.
I mean, I guess they must have balanced it, but.
Well, I mean, I think balancing became more and more of a concern as time went on. But I think early on it was more like, what would, I don't know. These curves look okay. It's Ship. I think it's more the Julian Gollop school, as we mentioned in the interview 2 weeks ago. It's like, yep. You know what? I think that's going to work. Sounds good. We've done a good job here today, folks. Let's ship it. So yeah.
Well, we had somebody write in. Was it after the first? It must have been after the first episode where they were talking about how Morrowind is their favorite. Was that a write-in, or did we have wherever? Oh, maybe that was on Twitter. Someone was saying that Morrowind was their favorite because of how much flexibility and like insanity you can, use to kind of like manipulate the systems and do what you want to do.
Might have been on Twitter. I can't remember.
Yeah. So it's I'm not surprised Morrowind is. Yeah.
I mean, it's a fidelity thing, right? It's because it's lower fidelity. Like they can just put as much stuff as they can think of into the game. And, that also means that because they put so much stuff into the game, can be very difficult to balance, and sometimes you get blind to it as well as a developer, right? You don't realize that your leveling system is kind of broken in a fundamental way. Like if you're not playing in the sort of towards your skills, it can definitely break the system, and that's something I don't know. That's honestly, it's a plus and a minus. Like I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I mean, I think. Because there's I think there are, user experience problems with it for people who don't realize like that's like, in your example, like leveling like crazy, your acrobatics, being super fast and can't hit, the broadside of a barn with your major weapon, would be a real problem, I'm sure, as the end game came. So that part of it can be really, really bad. But, once players understand what's going on, for the people who are going to play it, and are still playing it 20 years later, it's kind of a feature and not a bug in a way, So
I mean, maybe there's some of that. Maybe it's some of that Dark Soulsian. That's the modern version of that today, where it's like things are opaque, and you're like, I'm not sure I'm doing this right, and you kind of, there's. I think we've just gotten better from a usability standpoint of allowing players to catch up or get themselves out of a trouble. Like I'm wondering, like an example in this game, which. I don't know if we'll be able to figure out if it's happening or not, but say you're like level 50 or whatever, and you haven't leveled up your axe at all. If you fight creatures that are level 50 with it, it might go up faster. Like there might be there might be a multiplier or something.
If you hit, right? I mean, because I think it's all based on successes.
Yeah.
So it's like, it might go up faster per hit, but not.
Yeah.
But you're missing so much that it, like I sort of feel that way because I'm same with you as restoration magic. It's like, well, I should probably be able to heal. And so I have a couple of spells there. And I was like, okay, after a big fight, I'm like, well, I guess I'll be buying another potion after this. And I go and cast that spell a few times.
Yeah.
And it might fail like 4 out of 5 times, and I'm like, I don't know to what degree. Like, it's way too opaque for me at this point to understand how much that's going to help or hurt me. So, anyway.
Well, and then like with lockpicking and trap disarming under the security, it's like, I can see why they did this, but it's like, there's a certain number of charges or uses. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, if I get like 2 successes out of 1 lockpick,
right.
Then I've just, I'm going to buy another lockpick.
Yeah.
And so
with the probes and the lockpicks.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Oh my God. We should talk about that in the future because switching that stuff is so annoying.
Yeah. They just use one system.
I think there's a quick set for it or
there
something.
There is.
That's how you're supposed to mint. Yeah.
Well, I looked in the keyboard commands there are quick slots, but I haven't figured out how to use them. Yeah, how to bind them. Yeah. So probably should do that.
We should probably look into that a little bit. It's probably in the manual, which we should probably.
The funny thing, I forgot about mentioning this, but it did dawn on me this last session. This would be my fourth attempt at this game. The most times I've attempted one of these Elder Scrolls games. I actually bought the strategy guide for this game too. I had it. I was like, dang it, I'm gonna do it. And I, and that thing that was a beast. That strategy.
You should see the Skyrim one.
Oh yeah, I bet. Yeah. So I went that far, and but I got to do it this time. I got to get farther in this time at least.
Well, I hope you will. And speaking of reading, let's turn now to some emails.
Nice. Well done.
These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. We also like to read reviews and such on the cast. I don't think we've had any new ones in a while, and I confess it did not occur to me to check tonight because I was running up against it. Nope, no new ones. So I did not mess that up. But I think we have a couple of actually short ones that are like barbed questions towards the hosts. So I gave one to you to give. And then one for me as well to give back to you. So why don't you go ahead and read that first email? I think we'll just do the two because I know you've got time constraints tonight.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so the first one's subject is engine bugs from Mr. Mystery Dip. Thanks for coming on the stream so often, Mystery. This might be a sensitive topic as you were involved in one of the games. So if you won't answer, understood. But my goal is for this question to apply to the industry as a whole. Just the current game, just the current game series is a noteworthy example. The Net Immerse / Gamebryo engine has a long history in use in many games, according to Wikipedia, lasting over 25 years through its iterations. What I don't understand, given the number of games that used it and the amount of feedback / reports they've gotten from all of those teams, is how incredibly broken it could be at times to point to almost being a meme. To the point of almost being a meme. Things like NPCs forever walking into terrain or other characters, physics, making things fly apart from each other, characters spawning in with eyes and mouth but no face. That seems like I feel like that's a novel or something. The general.
I think it's a song actually.
Oh, okay. The
eyes without a face.
Right, there you go. The general crashing to desktop. I know that some of these games being open world makes the permutations incredibly complex, and some issues lay with the scripting teams or level designers. But how do engines end up shipping in multiple games with so many bugs? Regards, Mystery Dip.
Yes, so he's alluding to the fact that I've worked on one of those buggier games in Skyrim, although I will attest that it was probably less buggy overall than some of its.
I think that one's the least buggy game they've shipped. Yeah,
it might be. I'm not going to claim credit. Yeah, of course. It was entirely me. Oh my God, it's so important to me as a developer. It drives me crazy to see bugs on a fixed platform, especially consoles are fixed platforms, and they don't change. You know what they are when you start building it. But to talk about it in a sort of more general scope, and I'll use actually the Grand Theft Auto series as an example because I think it's another case. When I played Grand Theft Auto 3 the first time before the cast, like, I don't know, probably 15 years ago now, sort of on that order. I was like, well, what's this thing about? And I tried it out, and I played a bunch. I may have even finished it, and I was like, oof, that thing's pretty rough. And then I played Grand Theft Auto 4, And it was like, oh, wow, it's the same engine underneath. I mean, it looks a lot better, but you can feel the grinding of the gears in the engine itself. And I'll tell you, there's a couple of things, a few things really, but one major thing is success. Like, if you're as successful as Grand Theft Auto 3, why would you change anything? Like, people didn't care about the weird awkwardness about things, so why would you care? Like, it's really, really hard to in especially something of the scale of those sorts of games to perfect stuff, like to make it so you never see something that looks bad. The level you can go to make that true is very, very intense. Like, you can spend a lot of time to make something look quote unquote perfect. And your players have already said that we love this game. Well, so why would you do that? I mean, why would you spend that money? So to some extent, I think there is just like a being a victim of your own success to some degree. I also think there are other issues. I think that companies that have are somewhat isolated, and I would point to GTA 3. The company, this may not be as true now as it was back between 3 and 4, but in terms of where that company is located, it's not like there's a dozen other game studios around them. And so your talent pool for bringing in new talent and thus new ideas and new techniques, is not there. And so, you're the same people are making the games, right? So as well. And without, a really concerted effort to try to counter that happening, like to really focus and say, hey, we don't get enough new blood around here or whatever. We need to really up our game ourselves because we don't have people coming in. We really need to seek it out. Can also be just difficult to achieve, right? I mean, it would have to be a real focus of yours, I think, if you were where, I can't remember where, where Rockstar, whatever, North, I guess it is now, but originally it was just Rockstar. I don't feel like they're in London. I feel like they're somewhere kind of a little bit more remote. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't remember off the top of my head. But, so same problem. It's like, well, a lot of times solutions come from like new people, new ideas crashing off of the existing things as well, or just like, oh, hey, we did this thing, why not bring that in? So that's another thing that I think that can happen. And then the other thing too is that, what do you want to do more? Do you want to push and put more stuff into your big game, or make a game that's the same size as the last one, but make it a little more polished? Because again, like, the cost is huge, like, to make it really polished. So you're probably just going to get marginally better at the things that you can do. And maybe sizable margins, but not like light years ahead, because you're already making something pretty big. Versus like, but yeah, we could make it 2 or 4 times as big. And if it were kind of basically the same, like, I mean, there's just a lot of these sorts of issues. It's like there's economic issues of all sorts of type that are real pressures on not addressing fundamental, technical or pipeline or other sorts of debt. As a engineer, frequently a lead engineer or whatever, tech director now, I guess, like, I take seriously technical debt. I think it's okay to build up some technical debt. Like, I have done so recently. Like, it's fine to build up some technical debt, but you have to know what you're getting for it. And there becomes a point at which servicing that technical debt takes an awful lot of effort just to service it, not to pay it down, but just to service it. You might see that in, say, the federal government's deficit. So I don't know. Those are some thoughts, broadly speaking, and not talking about any particular studio that I can think of, at least from my seat as a technical guy. Because you're talking about bugs, and those are often, coding or at the juncture of coding in some other system, content provider or whatever. So yeah. I don't know about you, if you have thoughts about that, sir.
No, I mean, I think you speak about it way better than I would, but I guess the only general thing I think we've talked about on the podcast before when this topic comes up is, every game ships with bugs, and it's a matter of like, I don't know, there's an equation out there or like a Venn diagram or some like way to represent the balance that you have to make for shipping the game based on kind of what kind of game it is. And so I'll give you two extreme examples. You talk about like a Bethesda game, or you talk about an Uncharted game. And like Uncharted is a very specific, like linear polished experience that is a certain thing, but it also is it's a lot less. I mean, it's linear, right? It's a lot fewer options and not as systemic. And so it's like they're choosing to put their balance of those things into polish and storytelling or what have you, fidelity, etc. And then you have other games like GTA or Elder Scrolls or something where there's different sort of triage decisions being made. It's like, and the reason that GTA 3 people didn't care is because some of parts, it was there were enough amazing systemic open world moments there where it's like either the bugs became memes, as Mystery says, or they were endearing, or funny, or they just added to sort of like, or there was just so many good things about that particular game that you were able to look turn a blind eye to the fact that the bugs existed, so it's always a balance, I feel like. And there's always the triage phase where you're like, we're going through a list of bugs and we're like, yeah, well, in the grand scheme of things, is someone going to care or notice? And with an old engine, like he's mentioning in that regard, that doesn't do maybe as big of updates as say like an Epic would do or something along the way, there's both technical debt within the engine, but when you use, I think one misconception, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, but one misconception is that just because you're using an engine doesn't mean it's the engine's bugs.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, you're going to use Gamebryo, but you're adding a lot of extra stuff on top of that, especially in the gameplay realm. That is not part of the engine.
There's very little Gamebryo left in, if any, at this point in a Bethesda game. There's still some, but it's mostly like file formats and stuff by the time we
get exactly. It's a whole different engine, right? I mean, the other example
it's a Ship of Theseus example, right? It's like, well, sure. I mean, I guess there's some nails down there in the hold,
yeah.
But like we replaced the cross beams, the sails, this mast, this other mast twice, and then of course we had to do all the decking again. I mean, it's like that. I mean, it literally is.
Yeah, it's not like Gamebryo shouldn't, like, it's not an engine. Like, they shouldn't get blamed for, and that's another. So anyway, I mean, it's just it's a great question, and it's a constant debate and topic for developers, but it's always just a balance. It's a risk reward triage challenge, and making sure you balance that stuff, because you don't want your eyes to get bigger than your stomach at the end of the day either. And that's sort of what kind of Brett's talking about with technical debt, like, we tried to do too much, and there's no way we can fix it all, so it's like it's
or push a system far past what it was
supposed to do.
If it was even designed to do it. It was more like it just kind of happened that now we could do this thing. It's like, well, could we also do this thing and this thing and this thing? And pretty soon it starts to look like a deck of cards with 2 on the bottom and 10 on top. So it can be, or a house of cards, I mean. So it can be really tricky. So mine for you, sir, is a little bit more pinpointed, a little bit more sharp. It's very specific.
Oh,
it's from Ben from Iowa Zaug.
Oh no.
The subject is Halo dual wielding. Tim, what happened to dual wielding in Halo? Why did it go away starting on Halo 4? I love this in 2 and 3. I keep trying to do it in Infinite, even though it's been years since it was in a game, and 343 is the developer that did away with it. Thanks, Ben from Iowa Zaug. First of all, Tim was not there for Halo 4.
No, I was there since then, though.
Tim, why have you not put dual wielding back into Halo?
I mean, it's funny because it kind of sort of ironically segues from the last topic in a way, because it's really just a scope and risk thing. how I would, because I mean, I was in those conversations since 4, right? Because I came in right after 4 finished and worked on 5 and Infinite, and so it's a great system and a great gameplay system that's super cool, but it also brings huge repercussions with how the game is balanced and played. And I think with 4, the team was making their first Halo game, right? And they needed to sort of, and it's sort of like focus. I don't want to say limit constraints, but they needed to focus, right, on making a good Halo game. And, there's a reason that Halo 1 didn't have it, but Halo 2 did, and then, and so it's like an iteration, right? It's like they were able to, and with 5, it was very much like carrying on from 4, and there was other goals there. And then, who knows where Infinite will go? I don't know. Like maybe they added in there someday. I don't know anything, but it's like, it's just a scope. It's a scope. It's a complexity and scope and focus thing. So I don't, there's nobody in the studio, I would say, that doesn't want it. It's just like, when do you do it? How much you risk, and is it,
and how much is it worth to you? What are you willing to give up for it? Right. I mean, we just talked to Jamie Griesmer in the last episode, so that was 2 weeks ago now. So sorry for being sick, but he talks about that golden triangle, and when you switch out to being gun, because I played Halo 2. I had actually finished Halo 2. I couldn't believe I didn't remember. That's how. Actually, the big problem is there's no credits anymore.
Because of the Master Chief Collection.
The PC version, the collection. Yeah. And actually, if you go to the credits, there's a webpage. This is totally off topic. It takes you to a webpage, and it's 404. So you actually can't even see the credits of the game, which I think is really terrible, honestly. I was like, ugh.
Yikes.
Ugh. Yeah, yikes. I was not happy about that. Because I actually watch the credits of every game I finish. Even the Ubisoft ones, and those are ridiculous.
Even the Ubisoft.
Oh my god. Anyway, point is, he was talking about the immediacy and the golden triangle, and having played Halo 2, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't have the cycle of use the grenade to soften the targets, then push with this
big repercussions to the
melee.
Sandbox,
huge change of feel, and then to have to think about every encounter of like, is somebody coming in here with 2 guns, or are they going to be the more traditional player? Really recontextualizes everything, and it may honestly be. I mean, I have played 3, but not in a long time. I don't remember if I finished it. It may be that they did all that they could do from an encounter design, having to take all of those things into account. Like, it restricts what you can do ultimately when you design an encounter, because it has to work for now. Like, somebody comes in with this particular weapon plus grenades plus melee, or these 2 particular weapons, to now these particular 2 weapons versus 2 weapons and a grenade with the weapons you can switch between, and like, I don't even know what you do when you melee with 2 weapons, etc. Like, I mean, it's just like it starts to hem them in, because it's sort of not enough constraints on what the player has, and constraints are good for creativity, as we've said before on the cast. So
big impact to the you're just having to think differently about the sandbox for sure. So it's not impossible. And, again, I mean, of any of the modern Halo games, 4, 5, and Infinite, maybe because of Infinite's sort of more openness and even more systemic aspect, maybe dual wielding could have a place.
Maybe now's the time.
Yeah. But don't trust me.
They definitely. I'm sure it just gets brought up all the time. Yeah. I mean, that is one thing. I mean, playing Infinite, I really appreciated having a new tool. Although having just played, 1 and 2, it was like, oh, my hands. What do I do now? Like, my hands were like, I do this thing, and now the buttons are different. But having as many tertiary, I guess I'll call them tertiary options in the shield versus jetpack versus threat detector versus grapple. I used 2 of those, and it was very like and now for this section of the game, I'm going to use this one, but almost all of the game I use the grappling hook, and then I use the threat detector very specifically at the end, just when there were so many threats that it was nice to have a little bit more, warning and etc. So, there were 2 tools I didn't use at all in that game. So it's another thing. It's like the player getting overwhelmed with how many choices there are. I mean, it's a lot. That's a lot for sure. So that was another engine that had some technical debt. And I won't speak to whatever it carries now, but I know that I can remember even with 2 and the streaming stuff they were trying to introduce, that they had cutscenes where like characters would appear mid cutscene on some drives. Like Master Chief would be walking along next to somebody and they'd suddenly pop into existence while they were delivering the line. I think happened in the sort of initial area, or whatever. I can remember at the time it being a whole thing. Because nobody likes to point fun, like the games journalists, and the quote unquote fans. But anyway, I hope that answers the question, Ben from Iowa. And that, I think, will be our show, because you need a little bit extra time tonight. Thanks for those emails at devgameclub@gmail.com. We have quite a number more to get through, but we'll get through them. I think we'll be on Morrowind for a little while here. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub. We can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
A man who I like to think of as a kind of a villager, really. Who will be at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end, returning to Resident Evil Village over the next few weeks. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. I mean, I've
yeah.
Well, anyone who watched the 7 stream, like, it's a harrowing experience for me. Harrowing is probably a better way to say that, but anyway, yeah, I just like this. They did a great job with the new series, and I thought 7 was quite good. But it is just rough. They're rough to play, like from a psychological standpoint. So I'm like, and I've played the first bit of 8 for our bonus episode after 4. So I know what I'm getting myself into, and I'm a little like scared of just like what's to come. But I have more confidence because of finishing 7, so I can kind of see, because the curves changed from, the previous games from 4 and stuff. Like, it's different. You got to think differently about how power leveling or power curve is going to work. So I at least know, I know the game better. So.
Yeah, you should be well suited for it. And of course, as an iPhone user, you should think different. In any case, our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo is by Mark Garcia. Have fun managing your stamina this week, and good night.
Good night.